What's better, building a fixed gear from scratch using an old road bike frame and a combination of parts, or buying a purpose-built fixed gear? From what I can tell, the costs involved are very similar, so the price isn't the motivation of going either way. It would be more unique, I guess. Uniqueness is definitely a big factor for going for a conversion over a complete bike. While a complete fixed gear can give you a really easy entry point into getting on a bike, which is great for first-time riders, people who don't have tools, and people who don't know a lot about how to build a bike, then a purpose-built fixed gear is for those people. But if you're somebody that really likes to customize your stuff and research and build something that you can use yourself and know how to repair it, then going with a conversion is a much better option. And actually, assuming you already have access to tools, then going with the conversion can actually get you a better bike for the money. Because there's a lot of old steel road bikes out there that are actually really high quality steel that can make for an excellent conversion. The thing is, and that brings us to our next question, hey Zach, I'd like to know if you have an opinion or info on a vintage road bike to fixed gear build. Do they have any street cred, or would they get any fixie points? Can you use fixed gear components with track wheels and an 1/8 inch chain? As always, it depends. You're gonna have to do your research yourself. With old bike parts, there's different standards, so it'll be a toss-up whether it's going to work with the components that you have or not. I don't know if your particular frame set has an English threaded bottom bracket or an Italian or even a French threaded bottom bracket. I don't know the rear spacing on the dropouts, but chances are you're going to have to use some spacers to make it fit. And that's the thing with older bike parts, because there's so many different standards, you really have to do your research, and sometimes you just have to experiment to see what works and what doesn't work. And if that doesn't really sound interesting to you, then you might be someone who would just want to go for a complete bike. But if you're somebody that likes to tinker and really dive deep and do your research on the origins and all the different standards on your particular frame sets, and which frame sets from different manufacturers make the best conversions, then by all means, do your research. What I did, I started off with a complete fixed gear and I slowly upgraded it over time. And through that process, I accumulated more tools and more knowledge of how to work on my bike properly, and that was an effective strategy for me. Has your level of depression increased dealing with California Corona zombies compared to the carefree lifestyle of Taiwan? This question makes two assumptions that I do not agree with. First assumption being California Corona zombies, that people in California, because the health situation is pretty bad here, that people are just kind of lifeless. That's not true. And the second assumption is that my lifestyle was carefree in Taiwan. That also was not true. If you saw my video about why I decided to travel and why I left California about 1.5 years ago, it was because it was too easy here. It was actually too carefree here. Having a lifestyle that was too carefree was actually a big reason as to why I had depression. But I had depression and I no longer do. And one of the big reasons for that was because of traveling. After I started traveling, I stopped taking my depression medication and my mood was perfectly fine, and I felt like myself. And even now that I'm back in California where life is a bit too easy, I still have no symptoms of depression. I am perfectly fine. I'd even say that this whole health situation is a golden opportunity. Although it looks really bad on the surface, everything in life is what you make of it. It would be like, oh, boo-hoo, first world problems, if I started to complain about the virus situation. It's like, oh, boo-hoo, Zach doesn't have to pay rent. He has to live with his loving parents and save thousands of dollars per month. Boo-hoo. I have plenty of things to do. I'm reading like a book a week. I'm finishing that backlog of games that I've been sitting on. I'm learning a bunch of songs on guitar that I didn't have time for before. I now have access to my drum kits, which is a completely different mode of creative expression that I didn't have access to while I was traveling. This whole situation has stripped away a lot of distractions from my life, and now I have a whole lot of time to focus on the things that are really important to me, one of which is this YouTube channel, and as you may have noticed, my uploads have been a lot more consistent in the past few weeks. I'm getting 8 to 9 hours of sleep per night. I'm waking up early every day. I'm working out every day. I am honestly feeling pretty great, and I would go as far to say this is the best that I have felt in my life. And it's all because I decided to seize this golden opportunity we have. People are always complaining about how they're so busy, they never have time to take care of themselves and to do their passion projects. But nobody has that excuse anymore. The hardest thing for me though, being back in California, fire season just started and I have asthma, so I have not been able to ride my bike as much, and I feel myself just kind of, I have this inner burning desire to ride my bike, but I just have to wait until the air quality clears up. On a related note, can riding a fixed gear protect me from COVID-19? Getting outdoors and getting some exercise and fresh air and getting the endorphins pumping through your veins, that will protect you from the potentially mind-numbing effects of the COVID-19 situation. It will help you keep your sanity, stay healthy, and stay on top of your game. Speaking of riding a fixed gear to protect yourself from COVID, this video is sponsored by Wabi Cycles. Feel free to stick around until the end of the video to learn more about them. Are you going to try tracklocross and do a video on it? Probably not officially this year because the events aren't happening, and if they are, I'm not going to those events. Tracklocross is a way for me to get creative with my route planning and to try something new. So sure, if you want to see just riding videos of me finding some new gravelly tracklocrossy routes, let me know in the comments. Or heck, even if you're interested in just seeing me ride around California suburbs that are just cookie cutter, look the same as everywhere, let me know if you want to see that too. I can do both. Do you have a favorite website for aftermarket parts? eBay is pretty good. Craigslist, when you could meet people, was pretty good too. Other than that, once you get plugged into the fixed gear community in your area, assuming you have one, that's where I would get most of my parts. It's just my friend has some parts or his friend has some parts and we just trade within. What cycling channels do you follow on YouTube and Instagram? I actually don't watch a whole lot of cycling channels on YouTube, and I don't browse Instagram because every time I do, I feel worse about myself. GCN, that's the big one. There's some mid-sized channels, Terry Brenson, Matt Reyes, and Path Less Pedaled, and Spindat are all excellent cycling channels. Of course, Locked In, one of the guys who inspired me to make this channel in the first place. As for Instagram, I pretty much just check up what my friends on Faith Gear are doing. I haven't seen you mention bike bells much. Any recommendations? The SpurCycle Bell, super loud, also super tiny to keep your cockpit setup clean. Made in the good old US of A. It is a bit pricey though, link in the description. There's also this bell, I think it's a Suzu bell, link in the description, that I've used and it's also good. Thoughts on Bullhorn handlebars compared to risers. Preference between the two, pros and cons. I have an entire video on it here about handlebar types and which one is right for you. Basically, risers are more comfortable. They give you a more upright position, and that allows you to see over traffic, and you can get them in a lot wider widths, which gives you a lot of leverage over your bike, which can be a whole lot of fun. There's also the simplicity and approachability of risers. People know how to ride on risers, making them great for beginner cyclists. The con with risers, you only get one hand position, making them not great if you like to do longer rides, since it can be fatiguing to always have your weight distributed the same amount throughout your entire ride. Bullhorns, on the other hand, are famous for being really good at climbing. It gets your weight over the front wheel, so it makes it easier to spin up hills. And bullhorns also give you that second hand position that makes them slightly better than risers for long distance riding. But the reason I think you don't see bullhorns as much is if you're getting bullhorns, why not just get drops, which have even more hand positions, can be more aerodynamic and more comfortable over longer rides. I mean, it's all personal preference. Handlebars can be had for pretty cheap, so just experiment and see what you like. Did you hear that State Bike Co. is doing collaboration with Rick and Morty? I did not hear about that until this question, but that sounds pretty cool. Personally, I'm not a Rick and Morty fan, but I mean, the more collaborations that they can do to make cycling less pro and to make it more approachable, I'm happy for them. And this green snake core line actually looks pretty sick. What is the most practical trick to learn on a Fixie? Skidding if you are riding brakeless, because having more tools in your toolkit for stopping and not running into things is good. Track standing is pretty practical. You can track stand at lights, so you don't have to disengage from your pedals, and you can get a jump on traffic lights and stay with the flow of traffic. What fixed gear single speed bike do you recommend for big guys? I'm on a journey for losing weight, 290 pounds. Congratulations. I am happy for your healthy decision. And I need a bike that can handle my weight. Would love your expert opinion. The number one thing that you should be looking for is wide tires. Because it's physics, bigger guys are exerting a lot more force on their bikes through every bump and crack in the road. It's going to be rougher on the wheels and rougher on the tires. The challenge with bigger guys a lot of times is to get wheels that will stay true and to stop getting flats. And the best way to do both of those is to get really big tires, say 38C, 45C, something that can really distribute your weight evenly across the pavement and take some of the stress off of the wheels themselves. A couple of good options are the All City Nature Boy, the Wabi Thunder, and the Surly Steamroller. And secondly, it'll be good if you can get a wheel set with at least 36 spokes. 48 spokes would be better, so you're not having to true them all the time. How do you get the perfect chain line with Sugino 75s? Which BB should we use? Also, how long can one ride a loose ball bearing BB before it needs maintenance in a temperate climate? It seems like you have your answer already, but yeah, you should use the Sugino BB. The Sugino 75, while it is close to an iso taper, is actually slightly different from an iso taper, which is why a lot of people, such as myself, have stripped Sugino 75s. So if you want to avoid that situation entirely, the best BB to use would be the Sugino 75 BB. Luckily, Sugino recently released a sealed bearing BB that is actually cheaper than their NJS BB, so you can get the exact taper for Sugino 75s while getting a sealed bearing bottom bracket. But if you do want to use that NJS BB just because you're a baller and you want to show off that you have an NJS stamp on your BB that nobody is ever going to see, if you don't ride in the rain at all, you could last probably a year without having to repack it. But if you do ride in the rain a lot in a temperate climate, you could probably ride up to like a week in the rain before it starts to really bother you. When upgrading your fork, what is the effect of replacing it with something that has a different rake? For example, 30mm rake versus a 45mm rake. This is about front end trail. That is the number that measures how twitchy a bike's front end is versus how stable it is. And if you really want to dive deep, I suggest playing with the bike trail calculator in the description and seeing how the front end changes when you plug in different numbers. A lower bike trail number means that the bike's front end is twitchier, while a higher bike trail number means that it is more stable. And this number is affected by three things: your bike's head tube angle, your bike's fork rake, and your tire width. A steeper head tube angle makes it twitchier, and a bigger fork rake will also make it twitchier. So changing your fork rake from 30 to 45 mil will make your bike's front end a bit more responsive to your inputs. Speaking of bike geometry and bikes that have a nice balance of twitchiness and stability, this video is sponsored by Wabi Cycles. Every one of Wabi's design choices are meticulously made to give the purest ride quality for the money, and Wabi executes those choices perfectly with their bikes handmade by master craftsmen in Taiwan, and a friendly bike shop in Denver, Colorado that's eager to answer your questions and get you on a bike you'll love. Wabi's relentless attention to detail results in Wallace, my 58cm Wabi Special, weighing in at a grand total of 17.5 pounds straight out of the box. That's well under 20 pounds for a stock bike with completely steel lugged frameset, and no carbon components. And that weight isn't just for quoting and impressing other cyclists though, it results in the best riding experience that I've ever had, with a snappy and lively ride quality that only top tier steel can bring. That pure fun makes it easy for me to ride my Wabi Special as my only bike. If you're looking for a bike that puts an end to your search for the perfect bike, consider checking out Wabi Cycles linked at the top of the description, as it really is the closest thing that I've ridden to a perfect bike. Fixie famous shout out to Stan Strong 108, Ryan Witt, Julian Cardona, Eric Avallo, Gio DeZeta, and Crooks for helping to make these fixed gear videos possible through their support on Patreon. And remember, life is short, but don't make it shorter, so ride your bike every day, even if it is alone, to be reasonably dangerous.